Welcome to session 10 of Shepherding Your Child's Heart. Today we're going to be considering the cost to be a parent who shepherds the heart of your child. Because shepherding the heart of your child means that you have to take the time to build a heart relationship with that child. Now, I know you love your child, but does your child feel that love for them? It's important that they know we love them and they will trust us as they know we seek to know them and we seek to understand what's going on in their life, what they're thinking, and therefore we can know their heart and share our heart with them. Communication obviously is always a two-way street, and so it's important that we not only build a relationship with them as we seek to understand their heart, but we need to let them see our heart. Parents do not have to be perfect, nor do our children expect us to be perfect, but they do expect us to be honest, and they expect us to not be hypocrites, but to keep our word. And when we fail to keep our word or when we sin against them, we need to be willing to admit that and say, I have sinned against you. I'm sorry. I've asked the Lord to forgive me, and I will ask you to forgive me as well. Be vulnerable. You think, well, I don't want them to see my weakness. Well, they know you're weak, so you might as well show it and be honest about it, and they will respect you for that. Now, we've talked about many forms of communication. And as we talked about them, you may have felt overwhelmed. You may have thought, well, how in the world can I do all this? Well, take one or two at a time and deal with those issues, getting to know their heart, asking them questions, probing questions. And again, these are age appropriate. You don't talk to a 2-year-old the way you talk to a 12-year-old. So you use your common sense to determine what's the appropriate questions to probe. And in the earlier years, it's not so much probing as it is giving them correction, teaching them to obey your word, and helping them to understand what it means to be obedient and what it means to honor. And if they obey you, then they will grow up to honor you. And we're going to talk next week about the rod, which is so important in these earlier years in order to bring about the obedience, which means the will, their will, has to come under subjection to your will. And as the God-given authority in their life, that is appropriate and proper for their will to come under your will. You're the parent, and God has given you that authority as his delegated authority, and we teach them to obey us, and then we continue to instruct them. And I'll show a diagram to kind of explain this. As you are raising your children in the earlier years, you will influence more by your correction and by the authority you will use and exercise in their life. Now, as they are growing older, then you begin to exercise less correction, less of the use of the rod, and we'll talk about that next week, and more of conversation and reasoning and influencing them by them seeing your heart and you getting to know their heart. And so it is a gradual thing, depending on the child, different ages for different children, where you make the slow transition. And finally, when they're adults, then obviously all of your effect on them is through your influence. As they honor you, they respect your word, and as you exercise the authority as a parent, which when they're grown is not much at all. In fact, once they get married, then you relinquish all authority over that child. And when they become adults, you do that. And therefore, you must exercise your parental duties by teaching and talking and reasoning with them as adults. So again, it's wisdom that you must apply to the age appropriateness of the situation. But let's talk about counting the cost. Being a parent is a full-time job. It is one that deserves your highest priority. only exceeded by your priority in your personal relationship with the Lord and your relationship with your spouse. The Bible teaches a husband-wife relationship is the most important human relationship, but next to that is your relationship to your children. And it takes time, it takes effort. That means your house may not look like a dream house. It may not look like a house out of Better Homes and Gardens, but you have to make some sacrifices. Men, it may mean your handicap in golf will not be as low because you're spending time with your children rather than being out on the golf course as much. And so there has to be sacrifices. Work must come second to parenting. We forget sometimes that we have a job so we can provide for the family, so we can parent the children, and we can do things together. When the job becomes an end in itself, then it interferes with the parenting. And so we have to be willing to make sacrifices. You may not be the CEO of your company because you've chosen instead to make parenting a priority. And let me say, it is a most worthy priority. When you raise children who love the Lord and who understand your heart and you understand their heart, it is worth every second that you spent parenting them. It's worth every sacrifice that you ever made to put your relationship with them above other relationships other than the ones I've mentioned. It's worth it. And so I want you to think about this week. What are you willing to sacrifice to be the parent that will shepherd the heart of your child? Are you willing to sacrifice? How much are you sacrificing? Talk about this. Talk about what it looks like. Talk about if you are putting some things ahead of your parenting responsibilities that you need to consider and maybe put aside. So just spend some hard moments as a couple talking about these things and asking, Lord, do I really have the grace? Do I really have the commitment to my children and to you to make them the priority you would have me to do? And ask God to give you that grace. Ask Him to help you to make them the priority that He wants them to be. All right, next week, I look forward to talking to you again, and may God bless you in your efforts to raise your children to honor and glorify